She thought she had the perfect life, married to a man she adored and sharing everything with her best friend. But one rainy afternoon, she uncovered a secret so deep, it shattered her world. Instead of screaming, she stayed silent and began planning her quiet revenge. What happens when betrayal meets brilliance? This isn't just a story of heartbreak, it's a story of transformation, strategy, and ultimate freedom. Stay with me, because you won't see the ending coming. My name is Haley, and if anyone had asked me 3 years ago who I trusted most in the world, I would have said two names without hesitation: my husband, Jason, and my best friend, Brianna. Jason was the man who made me believe in forever. He was charming without trying, with a way of brushing my hair behind my ear and making the world feel quiet, even when everything else was loud. And Brianna? Brianna was sunshine wrapped in perfume and secrets, the kind of friend who always knew when I was on the edge of tears before I even spoke a word. We had built something rare between us, the three of us, something that felt unshakable. I should have known better. It started with the smallest things, as these things often do: a misplaced look, a laugh that lingered too long, a sudden silence when I walked into the room. I told myself I was imagining it. Paranoia, I whispered, just paranoia born from exhaustion and overthinking. After all, Brianna and I had known each other since university. We shared everything: clothes, secrets, dreams, and Jason had always been kind to her, in the way a man should be to his wife's best friend. But kindness has shades, and over time, his kindness to her began to feel like something more, something I couldn't name but couldn't ignore. I remember the first time I truly felt it, that sting behind my eyes when I saw them laughing over something on his phone, their shoulders brushing too closely, the way she leaned into him as if I weren't even there. I smiled then, said something casual like, "What's so funny?" And Brianna tossed her hair back and said, "Just a silly meme." But her eyes never quite met mine, and Jason looked down like he was embarrassed. That night, I lay beside him in bed, listening to his breathing, wondering if the warmth I once felt in his presence had cooled forever. I didn't say anything, not then. What would I say? That I suspected the two people I loved most were hiding something from me? I wasn't ready to believe it, not yet. Instead, I did what many women do. I began observing, quietly, intentionally. I became the silent archivist of my own heartbreak. I started taking note of everything: the frequency of Brianna's visits, how Jason suddenly changed his cologne before she came over, how she brought wine without being asked, how he laughed harder at her jokes than mine. I noticed how Jason grew colder toward me subtly, like the slow dying of embers. He stopped asking about my day. He forgot our little rituals, like the Thursday night pasta we always made together, or how I liked a blanket at the foot of the bed. It was as though I had slowly become invisible in my own home, and in the void, their bond seemed to grow louder, more vibrant, like a song that only the two of them could hear. The worst part wasn't even what I suspected, it was that I still wanted to be wrong. I clung to every kind gesture Jason gave me like a starving woman offered crumbs, hoping each moment might be proof that I was imagining things. One evening, he surprised me with flowers, white lilies, my favorite, and I cried as I arranged them in a vase, not because I was touched, but because I knew the gesture was guilt wrapped in petals. And still, I said nothing. I smiled and thanked him, and we ate dinner like strangers who used to be in love. Brianna, too, played her part with terrifying grace. She'd compliment my outfits, ask about my job, even offer to help with chores when she stayed over. But her eyes, God, her eyes, they held something else. Guilt, maybe, or boldness. I couldn't tell. There was a new edge to her voice, a quiet confidence that unsettled me, as if she believed she could have everything, me and Jason, and that I would be too blind or too broken to stop her. It wasn't until that rainy Thursday evening in October that everything shifted. I remember it vividly. I had come home early from work, the kind of rare early arrival that usually warranted surprise and kisses. But that day, I entered to silence. The house smelled faintly of sandalwood, Jason's cologne, and I could hear soft music playing upstairs, the kind of ambient jazz he liked to play when he was unwinding. I didn't call out. Something in Me told me not to. Instead, I walked softly, each step up the stairs like a drumbeat in my chest. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, just enough for me to see shadows, movement, the kind of intimacy that doesn't belong to friendship. I froze there, my hand on the wall for balance, and I watched. I didn't barge in. I didn't scream. I just stood there in the hallway like a ghost in my own life, watching my husband and my best friend kiss with the kind of passion that used to belong to me. The world didn't end. It simply quieted into a kind of numbness I'd never known before. I backed away, slowly, without making a sound, descended the stairs, and sat on the edge of the couch with my hands in my lap like a woman carved from marble. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, not into rage, not into grief, but into resolve. I knew I would not confront them. Not yet. I would not scream or cry or beg for an explanation. No, I would stay silent. I would play my part as the unsuspecting wife. And while they carried on their affair, believing me blind, I would begin my exit, quietly, strategically, piece by piece. They would not see me coming, and when I left, I would take with me everything they thought I was too naive to protect. It was in that silence that my power was born, and in that silence, my plan began to grow. It was in that silence that my power was born, and in that silence, my plan began to grow. I became two women from that moment on. The Haley Jason saw. Soft-spoken, smiling, mildly distracted by work, perhaps too tired to notice the subtle closeness between him and Brianna, and the Haley who watched and calculated, who spent nights wide awake with her phone dimmed to low light, researching divorce laws, hidden accounts, and property clauses. I wasn't going to walk away wounded and stripped of everything. No, I was going to walk away whole, composed, and ready to let the two of them unravel in the ruins of what they thought was a secret. Every morning, I woke beside Jason, sometimes even letting his hand rest on my hip as if nothing had changed. I would smile when he kissed my forehead, brew his coffee the way he liked it, extra strong, a pinch of cinnamon, and make small talk about weekend plans. But behind my eyes, the flame was lit. I started collecting evidence, not just for court, but for myself. I needed to be certain, even though I already was. I checked his phone when he left it unlocked, not often, just enough to screenshot messages he thought were cleverly deleted. Brianna's texts were filled with careful euphemisms, half flirt, half code. They talked about running into each other, accidental meetups during lunch breaks, inside jokes I was never part of, and one text I'll never forget. Does she suspect? Jason's reply was immediate. She's too trusting. It's almost sad. I remember reading that, with a shaking hand and the sick realization that the man I once trusted to hold my heart gently now saw me as weak, as naive. That hurt more than the affair. That was the moment I began writing everything down in a password-locked document, carefully hidden, named grocery budget in my files. I documented every suspicious encounter, every message, every time Brianna touched his arm too long or stayed a little too late. I even started recording audio when they were alone and I pretended to nap upstairs. One day, while scrolling through our shared credit card statements, I noticed charges I didn't recognize: hotel reservations, flowers I never received, Uber rides to unfamiliar addresses. Jason was sloppy, comfortable, arrogant in his deceit. It was clear he never expected me to look. That was his mistake. I began transferring small amounts of money into a private account under my name. Amounts small enough not to raise any flags, yet steady enough to build a quiet reserve. I even went back to an old job I had once left to support Jason's business, taking on freelance work he thought was just for fun. I was rebuilding myself in the shadows of their betrayal. At night, when Jason rolled over in bed, pulling me into his chest, whispering lazy apologies for being tired or distant, I would lie still and memorize the hollow sound of his voice. It was empty, all of it. Our marriage had become a performance, and I played my role so well, I could have won an Oscar. But inside, my heart grew harder, not bitter, but resilient. I would not shatter for a man who underestimated me. I would not beg for the friendship of a woman who smiled to my face and kissed my husband behind my back. I let them think I was clueless, even complimented Brianna on her new perfume one afternoon, knowing full well it was Jason's favorite scent, the one I used to wear in the early years. "It's something I picked up on a whim," she had said, smiling. "Do you like it?" I smiled right back. "It suits you," I replied, my voice calm, my eyes steady, though every inch of me burned inside. There was a strange satisfaction in pretending, in holding back the storm I knew I could unleash. I wasn't ready yet. I needed more proof, more strength, more clarity. So I watched. I waited. I studied. They grew bolder, assuming my silence was ignorance. They whispered things when they thought I wasn't listening, exchanged glances across the room, disappeared at events only to return flushed and smiling. The affair had transformed from a secret to a smug game, and they believed they were winning. But I was learning something else too, something about myself. I wasn't the soft, scared woman I used to be. I was sharp. I was steady. I had learned to walk through fire without screaming. I started changing quietly, new clothes, new routines, a new posture. I stood taller, spoke with more authority, even when I said less. Jason noticed, of course. He complimented me more, as if sensing I was drifting. He grew nervous when I spent time away, asked where I'd been, who I was meeting. The irony made me want to laugh. Here he was, a man cheating in plain sight, suddenly wary of my independence. Just work, I'd say, just errands. I never offered more, and it drove him wild. I began therapy, not because I wanted to fix my marriage, but because I wanted to fix the damage it had done to me. I needed to understand how I got here, how I had loved someone so deeply that I lost sight of myself. My therapist was gentle but firm. She asked questions I didn't want to answer. But slowly, piece by piece, I began to see my worth again, not through the eyes of Jason or Brianna, but through my own. I began reclaiming my voice, my identity, the pieces of me that had dulled under the weight of deception. I no longer needed their love or their approval. I only needed freedom. My plan was nearly complete. I had the documents, the account, the legal counsel, the evidence, the strength. All I needed was the moment, the right moment, the perfect one. And I was patient. I could wait, let them laugh, let them kiss, let them think I was blind. Because the silence I had wrapped myself in was not weakness, it was power. And soon, that silence would become the loudest thing they'd ever hear. And soon, that silence would become the loudest thing they'd ever hear. It became a strange kind of thrill, this invisible theater I was directing where I let them believe they were writing the script, not realizing I had already outlined the ending. My days were methodical, my smiles rehearsed, my patience now sharpened like a blade hidden in silk. I wasn't just waiting. I was crafting the escape so precisely that when it happened, it would feel like poetry. They would be exposed not by confrontation, but by their own arrogance. I began designing my exit like an architect. I contacted a lawyer discreetly, a woman named Marla who specialized in complex divorces and who, after hearing just the beginning of my story, looked at me not with pity, but with a fire in her eyes. "You've done more groundwork than most," she told me, flipping through the folder of screenshots, recordings, and expense logs I had collected. "You're not leaving empty-handed. You're leaving with a legacy." Those words became my anchor. I scheduled every meeting during lunch breaks, every call behind locked doors. Jason thought I was overworking again, slipping back into my old habit of overextending myself for everyone but me. That worked in my favor. The more distant I seemed, the less suspicious he became. He thought he'd won. He thought I had folded into quiet submission. But I wasn't retreating, I was repositioning. And Brianna? She had grown. Reckless. Maybe it was the thrill of deception or the ease with which she got away with everything, but she began flaunting her presence in ways I couldn't ignore. She'd send Jason texts late into the night, the phone lighting up beside him as he slept. Sometimes she'd even call, her voice sweet and sleepy when he whispered to her in the bathroom. I heard everything, and yet I still didn't react. My silence was a storm, waiting for the right sky to crack. But the true shift came on a Saturday, one of those deceptively ordinary days when something inside you clicks, and you realize it's time. Jason had invited Brianna to our house for dinner. It wasn't unusual, she'd been a constant in our lives for years. But this time, the energy was different. She wore a dress I had once complimented, one I told her made her look stunning, and she walked into my kitchen like she owned it. Jason was already pouring wine, his smile wide, his laughter loud. I greeted her with a hug that felt like wrapping myself around a serpent. "You look gorgeous," I said, and I meant it not as praise, but as a farewell. That night, I cooked a 3-course meal, lit candles, set the table with the fine china we rarely used. It was a performance, the final act of the play they thought was theirs. Brianna gushed over the food. Jason praised me in front of her. We laughed, we shared stories, we clinked glasses. And all the while, I watched them, not with jealousy, not even with hate, but with a calm sense of distance. They were small to me now, predictable, trapped in a web they didn't even know I had woven. After dinner, as Jason stepped outside to take a call and Brianna offered to help with the dishes, I turned to her and said, "You know, I used to think I'd never survive betrayal." She froze, a dish in her hand, the water still running. "What?" she asked, her voice tight. I smiled. "Nothing. Just thinking out loud." I let the silence hang heavy, like smoke in the air. She didn't know what I knew. Not yet. I didn't want a confession. I didn't need it. I had the truth. What I wanted now was closure, and I would give it to myself. The next morning, I finalized the last details with Marla. We prepared the documents. I made arrangements for a temporary stay in an apartment across town under a friend's name. I called the bank, had the funds from my secret account ready to move. I packed the essentials quietly, strategically, hiding the suitcase in the trunk of my car. It wasn't about running away. It was about walking away without looking back. The beauty of it was that Jason still thought everything was fine. He kissed my cheek before leaving for work, even complimented the way my hair looked that morning. Brianna had sent me a meme the night before, trying to appear normal, trying to pretend she wasn't the architect of my slow emotional death. I replied with a laughing emoji. The calm before the storm. And then came Monday. I chose it because it was unassuming, forgettable, but to me, it would mark freedom. I waited until Jason left for work, his briefcase slung casually over his shoulder, his cologne lingering in the hallway like a ghost I was ready to banish. I waited until the house was quiet. Then I walked into the living room, sat on the couch, and called his office. "Haley?" His assistant answered, surprised. "Jason just stepped into a meeting." "That's all right," I said. "Just let him know I won't be home when he returns. I'm not coming back." There was a pause, confusion. "Is everything all right?" "It will be," I said, and I hung up. I didn't leave a note. I didn't leave a trace. I walked out. The door I had entered 1,000 times as a wife and stepped into the world as a woman who had reclaimed herself. I checked into my apartment, made a pot of tea, and sat by the window as the city moved around me. I felt nothing and everything all at once. Relief, sadness, power. I didn't cry. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't wonder what they were thinking. I knew what would happen. Jason would come home, find the silence deafening. He'd call, he'd text, he'd panic. Brianna would try to smooth things over. They'd search for signs. They'd think I had finally broken. But I hadn't. I had awakened. I had awakened. And the air tasted different now, like steel and sunrise, like the edge of something new. I sat in that little apartment, sipping lukewarm tea, watching the clouds move over the skyline while my phone lit up again and again with Jason's name. First calm, then confused, then increasingly desperate. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He wasn't calling because he loved me. He was calling because the script had flipped, and suddenly he was no longer the one in control. There were voicemails, long and pleading. "Haley, where are you? Call me, please. We can talk." Then another. "What the hell is going on? Did something happen? You can't just disappear like this." And then, finally, the softest one, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. Whatever I did, please come back. But I didn't flinch. Not anymore. I had cried all the tears I was going to cry. I had grieved the death of our marriage before he ever knew it was dying. Now, I was not mourning. I was reclaiming. That evening, I sat with Marla in her office, pen in hand, reviewing the divorce papers for the last time. We'll serve him Wednesday morning, she said. Everything's airtight. He won't be able to contest much. You've been methodical. Smart. I nodded, breathing in deeply. Let's do it. That same night, I blocked Jason's number. I deleted Brianna's contact. I unfollowed them both on every social platform. I didn't rage or rant or post cryptic quotes. I simply vanished from their narrative. And that, more than any insult or explosion, was what shattered them. Because silence makes cowards scream. They weren't prepared for my absence to feel like a consequence. I had become their mirror, and when I disappeared, all they had left was each other's reflection, and guilt is never a flattering lens. By Thursday, Jason showed up at my workplace. I knew he would. I had left no clues, no warning, and that terrified him. I watched him through the lobby glass, pacing, holding flowers, confusion written all over his face. He looked smaller now, not physically, but in presence. The man who once held my heart like it was the most sacred thing in the world now stood fumbling with words he had never rehearsed because he had never imagined I would leave before he let me go. I met him in the hallway, my posture tall, my expression unreadable. Haley, he breathed, like my name was a question, like maybe I'd say this was all a joke and we could go home. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. I stared at him for a long moment. You're right. I didn't. Because I didn't need to hear another lie. His eyes dropped, his shoulders folding in slightly. It wasn't what you think, Brianna and I. It was a mistake. It just happened. I laughed. Quietly. Coldly. Jason, you don't accidentally betray your wife with her best friend for months. That's not how accidents work. I was lonely, he said. You were distant. You stopped seeing me. No, I replied, my voice sharp and steady. I stopped sacrificing myself for a man who didn't notice when I was drowning. I stopped killing myself to make you feel whole. He tried to touch my hand, but I pulled back. You're just going to throw it all away? He asked. All these years? You threw it away when you chose her, I said. I'm just cleaning up what's left. He stood there, stunned, as if he truly hadn't expected me to be this composed. But I was done performing the role of the heartbroken wife. That part of the story had ended. Later that night, I heard from a mutual friend that Brianna was spiraling. She had tried calling me repeatedly, leaving voicemails that swung between defensive and pitiful. I never meant for this to happen. We were just lost. It didn't mean I didn't love you. The audacity of that final line nearly made me laugh. Love? Brianna had loved herself. She had loved the thrill. She had loved being wanted by the man I married. But she had not loved me, not truly. True love does not devour the people it pretends to protect. I didn't respond to her either. I didn't need to. Let them both sit in the silence they had created. Let them wonder where the cracks began, not knowing the crack was always in them. I spent my evenings in peace now, reading again, taking long walks in the evening light, listening to the city breathe. I started journaling not the pain, but the progress. I filled pages with the quiet triumphs, signing my name on the lease, cooking a meal for myself and enjoying every bite, waking up to no lies in the room. Healing wasn't loud. It was soft, steady, like rain smoothing the rough edges of something broken. I had stopped looking at their pages online, stopped checking if they were still together. I didn't care. Their punishment wasn't my rage, it was the fact that they could never undo what they had done, and they would live with the knowledge that the woman they thought they shattered had walked away unburned. I made peace with the past in pieces. I forgave myself first for not seeing it sooner, for staying so long, for believing in people who never deserved that level of faith. I forgave the version of me who clung to a broken promise because she didn't know how to let go, and slowly, I started dreaming again, not of revenge, but of freedom. I wasn't waiting to be saved anymore. I had saved myself. And in doing so, I had discovered a version of Haley that neither Jason nor Brianna had ever really known, the woman I had buried beneath years of compromise and quiet suffering. I had given so much to love others. But now, finally, I was choosing to love me. I had given so much to love others. But now, finally, I was choosing to love me. And in that choice, I found a kind of power that doesn't scream or shatter, it glows quietly, like the first soft light of morning after a long, bitter night. I stopped measuring my worth through anyone else's eyes. I stopped rehearsing the past in my mind, stopped questioning what I could have done differently. Because the truth is, no version of me, no matter how perfect, how loyal, how forgiving, could have changed the choices Jason and Brianna made. That was their reflection to carry, not mine. And so, I let go, not in rage, not in fire, but in peace. I let go of the memories that used to haunt me, the first date with Jason when he brushed a strand of hair behind my ear and called me luminous. The night Brianna held my hand when I was crying in a hospital waiting room, promising she'd always be there. Those moments, once sacred, no longer held power over me. I let them pass through me like wind through open windows. I had grieved them enough. I deserved to be free. Months passed. The divorce was finalized with barely a word from Jason. Marla had handled everything with precision and grace. The house was sold, the assets divided. The silence between Jason and me became official, legal, and liberating. I moved into a new place, a small loft overlooking the river, where I painted the walls myself, hung up plants, and made tea at midnight just because I could. It wasn't about starting over. It was about starting real. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged to myself. One day, while walking through the local farmer's market, I saw Brianna. Her hair was tied up. She wore oversized sunglasses, but I recognized her instantly. She was alone. No Jason. No laughter trailing behind her like perfume. She saw me too. Froze. For a split second, I could see the memory flicker across her face of everything we once were. Everything she destroyed. She took a hesitant step forward. "Haley," she began, her voice softer than I remembered. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I didn't offer a single inch. "Don't," I said, not cruelly, just calmly. "We don't have anything left to say," and I walked away. That moment was quieter than I imagined it would be. There was no satisfaction in her pain, just clarity, a final, gentle closing of a door that had remained cracked for too long. It wasn't about punishing her, it was about preserving myself. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten. No return address. Jason, he wrote 5 pages, apologizing, rambling, telling me he hadn't realized what he was losing, that Brianna had left him, that he hadn't been able to look at himself the same since. He asked if we could talk. Said he missed my smile. Said he didn't deserve forgiveness but hoped for it anyway. I read the letter once. I folded it back up and slid it into a drawer, not out of hope, but out of closure. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Forgiveness had already happened, but not in the way he imagined. I forgave him so I could live, not so he could feel better. And in that choice, I freed myself again. I poured my energy into things that made me come alive: writing, cooking, traveling alone. I went to a coastal town and watched the sunrise. While wrapped in a blanket, sipping coffee that burned my tongue, I danced at a bar with strangers who didn't know my story. I laughed louder than I had in years. And I didn't think of Jason. I didn't think of Brianna. I just breathed. One night, I was invited to speak at a small gathering for women navigating heartbreak and betrayal. I stood in front of them, heart pounding, and shared my story not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as a woman who chose herself. I watched their faces shift, some tearful, some wide-eyed, some holding their breath, and I knew in that moment that my pain had been transformed into purpose, that I had taken something that tried to break me and built something unshakable from it. I closed my talk with the words that had carried me through my darkest days: "You don't have to burn your past to the ground to heal from it. Sometimes, you just have to walk away and let it turn to ash on its own. The room was silent. Then came the applause. Real, raw, like thunder rolling through a canyon. That night, I walked home alone beneath a sky full of stars, and I didn't feel lonely. I felt whole. Not the version of whole that needs to be held or loved to feel valid, but the kind of whole that comes from knowing your worth down to your bones. From surviving the kind of betrayal that splits your world in two and still choosing to build something beautiful from the rubble. Haley? My name felt different now when I said it to myself. Not a woman who was left. Not a woman who was lied to, but a woman who found herself standing in the ruins and didn't just survive, but rose. If Jason or Brianna ever think of me now, I hope they remember the silence not because it hurt them, but because it was the first time they truly saw who I was. A storm wrapped in stillness. A woman they could never break. And I hope they understand. This much, I didn't lose them. I let them go. To hear more stories like this, watch our next videos and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for the latest, most emotional story times delivered straight to you.